Iran out. That's what angry Iraqi protesters were shouting as they set fire to the Iranian consulate in the city of Najaf. A significant anti-Tehran escalation. But how much influence does Iran wield in Iraq? Is it a force for good, or is it holding back the country and its people? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. After months of violent anti-government protests in Iraq, anger has turned towards neighbouring Iran. Demonstrators stormed the Iranian consulate in the holy city of Najaf before setting fire to it on Wednesday. A number of people were killed in the crackdown which followed, adding to the hundreds who've died in the last 2 months of protests. It's the strongest expression of anti-Iranian sentiment in recent months, with demonstrators accusing Tehran of supporting the government that they're trying to fight. It comes after similar attacks on Iranian properties in Karbala earlier this month and in Basra last year. Well, Baghdad has condemned the attack, sending army reinforcements to try to suppress the violence. A curfew has been put in place and so-called crisis cells have been set up. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister says that Iraq has a responsibility to protect the consulate and must send a responsible, strong and effective response. We'll get to our guests for our discussion in just a moment. But first, let's look at why protesters accuse Iran of meddling in the country's affairs. Like many Iraqi politicians, Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi has long-running ties with Iran, having worked with its leadership before the fall of Saddam Hussein. Others include former Prime Ministers Nouri al-Maliki and Ibrahim al-Jafari, and former Islamic Supreme Council leader Ammar al-Hakim and his late father Abdulaziz al-Hakim. Both political and military leaders are said to maintain a, quote, special relationship with Tehran, which was detailed in a series of intelligence reports leaked to US media earlier this month. Iran's also allied with the armed group, the Popular Mobilization Forces. The group is sanctioned by Baghdad, but some say the group represents an Iranian military presence in the country. So let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From London, we're joined by Saad Jawad, a member of the Research Committee of the Middle East Centre at the London School of Economics. Via Skype from Hertfordshire, Salah Hashimi, legal advisor to the National Council for Iraqi Opposition and a senior solicitor. And from Tehran, Fuad Izadi, professor at the University of Tehran in the Faculty of World Studies. A warm welcome to you all, gentlemen. Saad, let's start with you. It's clear that protesters are angry about what they see as Iranian influence in Iraq. But are they right? Is Iran a malign actor influencing or meddling in Iraqi politics, religion and economic affairs?
They are not only right, but there are very much examples. They have very much, too much examples about this influence the Iranian have. The last one was then when this demonstration started, and they were asking for the prime minister to resign, and he was ready to resign, by the way. Then the Iranians stepped in and influenced him to remain in power, defying all the protest of the people. The second example is that since 2003, the Iranians have been supporting corrupt, sectarian, ineffective, failing politicians to rule Iraq, and they kept on recycling them through these 17 years, and they have supported them to the end. To the fact that they kept them in power for all these 17 years. Then they have created this, or they have mobilized, or I should say, taken advantage of the creation of the Popular Mobilization Forces, and they have taken control of 60 or 70% of these forces by them, by their political, by their leader, Haj Qasim Soleimani. He is controlling them, and they declare in public that they follow orders from Iran and not from the Iraqi government, although the prime minister was supposed to be their commander-in-chief. So all these things have instigated the Iraqis the Iraqis, and they feel that the Iranians are really happy with such a corrupt, failing, and ineffective government, sectarian government, and they would like to keep it like this because they could control the country through these people.
Salah Hashimi, Najaf is the seat of the Shia religious authority in Iraq. What are your thoughts on the attack on the consulate and its significance? Are the demonstrators' concerns legitimate?
First of all, thank you very much for having me, and I would like to offer my sincere condolences to to those who have been martyred by the Iraqi uprising and to their families. Now, in terms of the significance of the attack in Najaf, it is highly significant because Najaf, as probably known to your viewers, is the holiest shrine in Shia Islam, and therefore the attack on it signifies plenty. I think the message from somebody within, or a group of people from within the demonstrators, might have been sent to the Iranians that you are no longer welcome because lots of pilgrims come to the city in order to perform religious duties. Now, I think we need to be very, very careful in analyzing the situation. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the demonstrators are the ones who have attacked the embassy, the consulate, sorry. Because, first of all, there are always a few bad apples within a huge group of people like the demonstrators. There may be some here. Number two, we have also the possibility of a self-inflicted wound or false flag attack. Clearly, the Iranians are looking to interfere in Iraq, this time openly and with open force. This could provide them with the pretext. Otherwise, you tell me, and thankfully, by the way, the Iranian embassy was empty when it was attacked. And the Iraqi security forces would have informed the Iranians to evacuate the embassy or the consulate prior to the attack. Now, if that is the case, I think the Iraqi security forces are more than capable of defending this consulate against demonstrators who are largely unarmed, with the exception of a few petrol bottles. Now, this raises a number of questions. If that is the case, was this orchestrated? I do not know, because I don't have the answers, because the attack has been very recent and we don't have much information about it. Just going back on the point that you made with your guest in London, I think the roots of Iranian involvement goes back very early on, since the invasion of Iraq, since 2003, when the Badr forces, who were openly funded, allied, and trained by the Iranians, entered Iraq and imposed themselves on the security forces with the degree that they became part of those security forces. They are accused of human rights breaches since early from the invasion. So I don't think it's a myth. And also, to add to that, the most recent revelations by Intercept and the New York Times, the papers that were revealed, documenting step by step almost the individuals with whom the Iranians have had contact, and of course the revelations that the entire government is corrupt and thoroughly abusing human rights. To have somebody like the Iranians backing them up, I think will invoke some anger among the demonstrators. That is not to say that we condone the attack on the consulate. It is highly deplorable. But I would also say this is a hallmark of Iranian practice. Let us not forget that the Iranian Revolution was blessed with an attack on the American embassy back early on in 1979. I think hostages were held for nearly 2 years. A year and a bit. So therefore, I don't think this is an Iraqi hallmark. It seems to be that there is some outside interference, and now we have reinforcement coming in from Baghdad, armed reinforcement, to crush the demonstrators who have always maintained that they're going to be peaceful.
Okay, let's bring in Fuad Izzadi in Tehran. You'll no doubt want a response to respond to some of what you've heard there, especially whether this attack was orchestrated or whether it was a false flag attack. But first, tell me, does Iran seek to control or influence those in political power in Iraq? Is it no longer welcome there?
I think Iran tries to have good relations with Iraq. We remember what happened when we had someone like Saddam Hussein in Iraq that fought Iran for 8 years, and that war ended in having hundreds of thousands of people killed. So having good relations with your neighbors is not something that Iranians want. That is a norm in international relations, that you should have close economic links, cultural links, political links with the neighboring countries, especially when you live in the Middle East, where you have lots of wars and terrorism and other security problems. Having good relations with your neighbors become even more important. So if the accusation on Iran is that Iran wants to have close links with different Iraqi parties, or Iran wants to make sure that another Saddam Hussein does not come to power in Iraq, then that's a fair accusation. Iran is interested in having good relations.
But does Iran seek to control what happens in Iraq? To what extent is what's happening in Iraq today? Does Iran accept that it's its fault?
And it's just totally exaggerated. If Iran had that much power, maybe they could have secured their own consulate in Najaf. So exaggerating Iran's influence in Iraq is a way of the losing parties in Iraqi election to accuse the winners of elections of some foreign connection. When you accuse the Iraqi government, you're basically insulting the Iraqi people that voted for that government. We know that Iraq is one of the few Arab countries that actually has representative government. We have monarchies, we have dictatorships, we have generals that come to power through coup d'etats in the Arab world. And we have Iraq that actually holds election when they want to have leadership change. And some of these monarchies don't like to see democracy in Iraq. That's why they accuse the Iraqi government of different things.
All right, but so how do you explain the anger in Iraq at the moment, particularly directed at Iran?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The basic question is that the people who attack the Iranian installations in Iraq, the consulate, are they representing the Iraqi people? And the answer is absolutely not. I encourage you to take part in the Arba'in walk next year. I don't know if you know this, but there is this religious ceremony for the Arba'in, the 40th day that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was martyred. That's a religious ceremony in Iraq. And you have 20 million Iraqis walking from Najaf to Karbala every year, and about 5 million Iranians join these people. Iraqi people feed these 5 million Iranians. That
has nothing to do with the ongoing protests. That's been going on for centuries now.
No, that's not during Saddam's time. That was prohibited. People were not allowed to take that. So if you want to
before Saddam, that was going on.
I encourage you. The people who attacked the Iranian consulate based on the local police and local authorities in Najaf came from outside Najaf. They are not from Najaf.
All right.
We have some organizations in Iraq that don't like Iran's.
Saad Jawad, what do you make of what you heard just there? That it's a total exaggeration that Iran has that much power and that the protesters are insulting the Iraqi electorate.
Well, let me correct a few things. To start with, no Iraqi wants to have another war with Iran. Iraqis are keen to have good relations with Iran. Second thing, it's an insult to the Iraqi people if you tell them that the last elections were true and genuine, and it was not rigged and it was not false, because 80% of the people did not participate in these elections, and there was a lot of question marks about the result, and even the government talked about these things. Third thing is Iraq was not the only responsible part about the Iraq-Iran war. The two countries were keen to have such war. Every country, every leadership thinking that it could defeat the other part and strike a victory over it within a month or two. Now, if we come to your questions, I think that the religious ceremonies that takes place in Najaf and ceremonies that take place in Najaf and Karbala have nothing to do with the feeling of the Iraqi people. The Iranian pilgrims are always welcomed by the Iraqis. They've never attacked them like what the Iranians did with some of the Iraqi pilgrims when they went to Iran to Mashhad. Now, the Iraqis are happy to have these people. And mind you, under Saddam Hussein, there were hundreds of thousands of people from Iran coming to do these pilgrims. And Saddam Hussein found that this was a very good way to improve his economic situation under the sanctions. The problem is that the Iranian officials spoke clearly about how they are controlling 5 Arab capitals nowadays: Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a, and Bahrain, and how they have influenced the government, and how they regard Baghdad as the capital of the Iranian Empire. All these talks have insulted the Iraqis, have injured their morale, their national feelings, and that's why they do not want to see Iranian political influence. They are ready to see good relations with the Iranians, but political influence, and most of all, supporting corrupt governments. I mean, Khamenei and Rouhani now are trying people, relatives of all the presidents and and religious leaders. So why do they prevent the Iraqi government or the Iraqi courts from trying officials who are ruling now under the name of Iran?
Salah Hashimi, to what extent are Iran and the US using Iraq right now as a pawn in their regional strategies?
Well, unfortunately, of course, Iraq became an open playing field since the invasion of 2003. It is an insult to anyone's intelligence to suggest that Iranians or the Iranian government, I'm not really talking about the Iranian people, we have all sympathy towards the Iranian people who have risen against their government. I am directly talking about the Iranian government here. Since the American invasion, it opened up a huge big gap in Iraqi politics. Since, of course, the dismantling of Iraqi infrastructure and the entire state, including the army and the security forces, that opened the door for Iranian-trained proxies who entered the country and seized the political scene. Since then, they have been building up, to their credit, quite successfully, a political infrastructure in order to control the country and to make it a crony for the neighbouring Iran. And they have been, as I said, successful. Now, what has happened is that the Americans almost somewhat lost control on the ground, because the Iranians have been preparing this for years. And I will give you an example, because what happened in the uprising against Saddam Hussein in 1991, there are credible reports which suggest that Iranian-backed forces did cross the border to support the revolutionaries at the time. But, of course, they were crushed by the Iraqi army, who was reasonably powerful during that period. Now, as I said, the Americans have conceded power on the ground to Iranian influence, because what has happened is that those political parties who were supported and trained and also directed by the Iranian government seized on the open corruption in Iraq, and they have built up a mountain of wealth that facilitated for them the creation nowadays of armed militias who are backing them up. And this is exactly the root causes of the problem. This is what the demonstrators are complaining about. People are talking about this mysterious third party. I do not think that this third party is no longer mysterious. They are either militias backed by foreign powers who are supporting this corrupt government because they share that common interest in that this government must pay, so that the corruption will flow the funds onto them, and they are not willing under any circumstances to relinquish power.
Fouad Izzadi in Tehran, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman condemned the attack in Najaf and demanded decisive, effective and responsible action against what he called destructive agents and aggressors, this mysterious third power. Who did he mean when he said that? And can you answer me this question? Are Iranian security forces involved in any way, either as advisors or directly on the ground in confronting demonstrators in Iraq?
I think he's talking about the U.S. government. The U.S. embassy in Baghdad has about 5,000 employees, which is an amazing number. Iranian embassy in Baghdad has about 50 employees. So when you're talking about foreign influence, you need to talk about the number of people that the U.S. government has in Baghdad and the number of people that Iran has in Baghdad. We have U.S. forces occupying Iraqi military installations. We had U.S. Vice President Pence visiting Iraq and not visiting Baghdad, going to the Kurdish region, violating Iraqi sovereignty. We have the Saudis that have interfered in Iraqi affairs for many years, using petrodollars and paying anyone who's available to attack Iran. We had ISIS that tried to overtake Baghdad. And based on what we hear from our Iraqi brothers, if it was not for Iranian help, Iraq would not be able to resist against the ISIS installed. And they even tried to take over the Kurdish region. And based on what the Kurdish leaders say, that it was Iran's help that saved Iraqi Kurdistan from ISIS. So when you're attacking Iran and you're entitled to do that, that's okay. Iran is mature enough to be able to take these type of attacks.
And are its forces on the ground? Are its forces involved on the ground in confronting the demonstrators in Iraq or advising Iraqi security forces? Very briefly, if you can, please.
The Iraqi security forces are capable of securing their country. They fought against ISIS. The Iraqi government does not have good relations with the United States. That's why the U.S. government officials don't visit Baghdad. They want to basically overthrow the government. The Iraqi prime minister wanted to have contracts with Chinese, and the U.S. ambassador went to his office, asked him not to go to China. They don't like the fact that Iraq is buying weapons from Russia. We have a lot of geopolitics going on here. And when you see 50 people or 100 people attacking an Iranian installation, please remember that this is not representing the Iraqi people. The Iraqi people are the people who participate in the Arabian walk.
Fuad, I need you to give me a brief answer here because we're almost out of time. Is Iran ready to accept an Iraqi prime minister who has not lived in Iran or been influenced by Iran in any way?
That's not an Iranian decision. That's an Iraqi decision. Iraqi people participate in elections. And if they don't like the prime minister, they will change it. And if some of your guests don't like the current prime minister, they need to work next time. Maybe they get the prime minister that they like. Because there is democracy in Iraq, unlike a lot of other Arab countries.
It's not the guests. I think it's the demonstrators in Iraq who don't like it. Saad Jawad, we'll give the final word to you. Could this attack be the beginning of the end of Iranian influence in Iran? And if a new government is formed in Iraq due to the protests, is it going to be possible to appoint politicians who are not some way linked to or influenced by Iran? I need a very brief answer from you, please.
Yeah. To start with, when we criticize Iran, that doesn't mean that we are supporting the Americans. We look at them both as harmful influence. They have harmful influence in Iraq. The second thing, this could be done because the prime minister tried to resign, and the president of the republic said that on TV that he was ready to resign, and all things were moving towards finding someone else to replace him. But the Iranian stepped in and changed this decision. So I think unless the Iranian government, I always thought that the Iranians were clever in politics and they would not support failing or sectarian or corrupt politicians. But in Iraq, they are doing the wrong thing. They could always support people who are on the Iranian side, but clean and nationalist and could do good things for their country.
Saad, I'm sorry to keep it so brief there. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you for joining us today. Saad Jawad, Fuad Azadi and Salah Hashimi. Thank you, as always, for watching. Don't forget you can see the programme anytime, again, just by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion on this issue, join us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter, our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.